Hi class, Michael here, and today I'm going to read Let the Children March by Monica Clark Robinson and illustrated by Frank Morrison. Now, the book is recommended for grades 1 through 4 and has a Lexile level of 650. And for some context, the book takes place during the 1960s, during the Civil Rights era movement, and it's about the diversity of all races. And it deals with segregation, and segregation was a horrible policy that was allowed in the Deep South after the American Civil War, and lasted all the way until the late 1960s. And this book deals with one of the events that happened during that time. It was called the Children's Crusade in Birmingham, Alabama. And in the 1960s, Birmingham was considered by many to be one of the most segregated cities in all of America. Martin Luther King Jr. himself considered it to be one of the most segregated cities in the entire country. Now, the Children's Crusade and the peaceful protests that was led by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was from April 3rd, 1963 to May 10th, 1963. And some of its leaders included Martin Luther King Jr., James Bevel, Fred Shuttlesworth. And at the time, Alabama its governor was George Wallace. He was very racist. And the Commissioner for Public Safety in the Birmingham area, or the entire state of Alabama, was Eugene Bull Connor, and he was also very racist. And now I will begin the story. The book begins with a timeline of events that occurred just before and at the end of the story, after the movements, or the Children's Crusade, excuse me. I'll read off a few, and it begins with civil rights and the Children's Crusade. And, let's see, on January 14th, 1963, Governor George Wallace makes his inauguration speech calling for segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And on April 3rd, the first organized sit-ins take place at downtown lunch counters. On April 12th, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other protesters are arrested after leading a non-violent protest for demonstrating without a permit. On May 2nd, this is known as D-Day. The Birmingham Children's Crusade begins. By the end of the day, 973 young marchers are jailed. On May 3rd, this is known as Double D-Day. Protesters are arrested, most of whom are under 18. Commissioner Bull Connor authorizes the use of water hoses and police dogs to control the crowds. Close to 1,000 are arrested. From May 4th to 9th, protests continue to escalate as more adults join the marches. The jails are at maximum capacity, with thousands of young people imprisoned. On May 10th, Dr. King and other protest organizers reach an agreement with city leaders that begins the process of desegregation. The Ku Klux Klan holds a rally, and the home of A.D. King, Dr. King's brother, is bombed. And on May 19th, the school board expels many of the student demonstrators, but a federal judge overturned the expulsions just 3 days later. And for a bit of context, the reason why so many children and young adults protested was because many of the parents and members of the peaceful protest did not want to lose their jobs in fear of retaliation. So children, like people in college mostly, but also children in elementary schools and high schools and middle schools, were asked, do you want to do this? And most of them agreed, and this is the story of it, which I will begin now. And this is a book about diversity, but it's also a bit about historical fiction at the same time, but it's mostly about diversity. And this is how the story begins. Let the Children March. 1963, Birmingham, Alabama. I couldn't play on the same playground as the white kids. I couldn't go to their schools. I couldn't drink from their water fountains. There were so many things I couldn't do. One warm spring night, my family went to church. We weren't there to have regular services. We were there to hear Dr. King speak. We were there to plan. Excuse me. He wanted to raise an army of peaceful protesters to fight for freedom, his brown eyes flashing fire and love. Dr. King told us the time had come to march. If I march, Mama said, I'll lose my job, sure enough. I can't march, Daddy said. I got a family to feed. The weight of the world rested on our parents' shoulders, but this burden, this time, did not have to be theirs to bear. I don't have a boss to fear, my brother said, or a job to lose. We can march this time. We'll be Dr. King's army, I said. I'll be fine, Daddy, I promised. Don't worry, Mama. Dr. King didn't like children being put in harm's way. He was a daddy too, after all. But he said that though we were young, we were not too young to want our freedom. Let the children march. They will lead the way. On May 2nd, a sunny Thursday, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, cousins and friends, we all met at the church, dressed in our best, feet ready. In a silence so loud that I could hear my heart rate, all I could hear was my racing heart. We began to walk. Hand in hand we marched, so frightened, yet certain of what was right for freedom. The path may be long and troubled, but I'm going to walk on. Would I be hurt? Would I be heard? Would we be heard? Would it all be worth it in the end? I wanted to run from the angry faces in the crowd, run from danger, run from fear. Boys and girls, brothers and sisters, cousins and friends, on and on we marched. We marched. We marched. Singing the songs of freedom, 1,000 strong we came. Hate dogged my heels all that day, its yellow canine teeth sharp, but courage walked by my side and kept me going. Disperse or you'll be jailed, the police shouted the first day. Disperse or you'll get wet, the police shouted the second day. Disperse or we'll release the dogs, the police shouted the third day. We did not disperse. We kept on marching. We wouldn't stop until things started to change. Hundreds of us went to jail on the first day, and even more on the second. My turn wasn't until the third day, after I was sprayed by water stronger than anything I've ever felt. Rough hands pushed me forward, and I fell to my knees in the police wagon. I was going to jail. Dr. King reassured our parents. Don't worry about your children, he said. They're going to be all right. Don't hold them back if they want to go to jail, for they are doing a job for not only themselves, but for all of America and for all of mankind. That night, crowded into a cell too small for even half of the kids, we sang, "We shall overcome, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, and freedom is coming." Our parents shouldn't be there with us. Our parents couldn't be there with us, but we still we sang, wrapped in the proud and loving arms of our ancestors. I was still in jail, but we heard that the next day and the next more kids marched. The water hoses they used to sting us could not stop our fierce tide. The path may be long and troubled, but I'm going to walk on. Turn the other cheek, we had been taught. Show love where there is hate. The world watched as hate bruised us, but for 7 days we walked only in love. The jail swelled to bursting, and even President Kennedy took notice. Daddy said the president received letters and calls about us from all over the world. Our march would become a memory, a small part of a larger story. But we had been heard, and the seeds of revolution were sown. 2 days and nights I stayed in jail. Some stayed even longer. When I left, I was tired and sore, and my best dress was ripped. But my smile was as wide as the Mississippi River. I had made a difference. I'm so proud of you, baby girl, Mama said. Your march was what made them see. With nothing more than our feet, voices, and courage, we had done what others could not. Change was right around the corner. We felt it like a cool breeze in the Alabama August. On May 10th, the great news rang out. Dr. King had reached an agreement with the white leaders of the city. Desegregation would begin. 1 month later, I was playing on the playground I'd never been allowed to play on before. 2 months later, my family ate at a diner we'd never been allowed to eat in before. Our march made the difference. We children led the way. Singing the songs of freedom, 1,000 strong we came. And that's the story. And there is an afterword, and it's actually a picture of the Children's Crusade right there. That's them being sprayed down with water hoses, very high power water hoses by the orders of Bull Connor, and there are some more pictures right here of the protesters, and as you can see, the children being filed to be arrested. And I actually remember watching a documentary about this when I was in elementary school, and I just thought it was very awful, to be honest. But we're making progress, and we're getting there. But the book, while it is a little bit historical fiction, I think what it does is it represents all of the children during the time of the Children's Crusade and the Birmingham protests, the peaceful protests, and it represents the diversity that the people, African Americans wanted, and it's a good book. I enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and that's all I have.